The morning Karga Darkwolf was supposed to be married. She stood at the altar alone, and every soul in Duskwall's little stone chapel knew it. She had been standing there for 20 minutes already. The candles on either side of the rough-hewn wooden altar had burned down a full inch. The wooden pews were packed tight with the town's folk merchants, cattlemen, frontier wives clutching their shawls, a couple of off-duty cavalry troopers in the back row who had wandered in out of sheer curiosity, and not one of them could look her in the eye. They looked at her boots instead, at the floor, at each other. Anywhere but the tall, green-skinned woman in the fitted warrior's dress of deep burgundy leather who stood at that altar with her jaw set like iron, and her black-painted nails pressed flat against the tops of her thighs. Her dress was a work of quiet ferocity. The bodice was snug and boned, laced tight up the front with dark cord that crossed in clean X's from her navel to her collarbone. The shoulders were bare, the leather cut away to show the strong green curve of muscle there, and a short cape of black wolf fur hung from a single clasp at her left shoulder, a hunter's trophy, worn as ornament. Her skirt was a fitted wrap of the same burgundy hide, slit high on one side for movement, and beneath it her calves were wound with dark leather bindings over skin-tight trousers. 2 silver rings sat in her right tusk. Her hair, a thick black braid shot through with a single bone pin, lay against her spine like a war banner waiting to be raised. She was, by any honest measure, the most striking thing in Duskwall, and she was alone. The man she had agreed to marry, a horse merchant named Colt Hardin, who had arranged this match through a frontier broker 2 months prior, trading in what he called an alliance between his caravan business and the Darkwolf clan's northern trade routes, was not coming. Everyone in the chapel already knew this because his stable hand, a boy of about 15 with a guilty red face, had slipped inside 10 minutes ago and whispered something to the chapel's steward, who had gone pale as fresh chalk. The steward had not yet worked up the courage to approach Karga and tell her. She already knew anyway. She had known from the moment she had heard the boy's boots on the stone floor. She had heard the shape of the whisper. She had watched the steward's color drain. She was an orc of the Darkwolf clan, raised in a war camp at the edge of the Greystone Mountains, and she had learned to read a room the way other people read weather. She knew a storm when she felt one. What she had not expected was that it would hurt this much. Not because she loved Colt Hardin, she did not even slightly. The match had been her clan elder's idea, and she had agreed to it because her clan needed the caravan routes. It was a practical thing, as her elder Ureg had said, practical as a tent peg. She had arrived in Duskwall 3 days early, had eaten in Hardin's dining room twice, had shaken his soft hand and looked at his soft eyes and thought, well, this is what alliance looks like. Fine, she could do this. But standing at the altar now, with the whispers starting in the pews behind her, low, uncomfortable, embarrassed sounds, she felt something tighten in her chest that had nothing to do with the lacing of her bodice. It was the old, familiar thing, the thing she had been fighting her entire life. The particular flavor of humiliation that came with being an orc in a human town, where being left was not just being left, it was being proved right about. You see, their expression said, you see what happens, you see what you were all along. She breathed once, slow and deep. She was not going to cry, she was not going to rage. She was going to stand here exactly 1 more minute, and then she was going to walk out of this chapel with her head level, and she was going to figure out what to do next. That was the Darkwolf way. The chapel's heavy side door opened, not the main doors at the back, through which the groom was meant to have entered. The side door, the one that led in from the hitching yard where the cavalry kept their remounts tied on market days. A rectangle of gray morning light, and in it, a man. He was not tall, not particularly. Average height, broad through the shoulders in the way of men who work with their hands and their whole body. He was wearing working clothes, heavy canvas trousers, a collarless linen shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbows, a leather apron still buckled around his waist with the tools of his trade hung from the loops, a rasp, a clinch cutter, a small hammer. He had clearly come straight from the hitching yard, because there was horseshoe soot on his forearms and a smear of it across his jaw where he had pushed his hair back. Dark hair, close-cropped, with a few days of shadow on his face. Plain, honest features. The kind of face that you looked past in a crowd without meaning to. He stood in the side doorway for a beat, taking in the chapel with quick, reading eyes. He saw the pews. He saw the candles. He saw Karga at the altar still standing, still straight, still doing that thing where she made her face into stone so no one could see what was underneath. He saw the empty space beside her. He saw the steward still dithering near the font with his terrible news that everyone already knew. He saw, in one of the front pews, Myra Holt, the frontier broker who had arranged this match, covering her mouth with her hand and staring at the floor. Seth Turner had been shoeing cavalry horses in the hitching yard since before dawn. He had not been invited to this wedding. He had, in fact, barely spoken to the orc woman whose horses he had reshod on her arrival 3 days ago, when she had ridden into Duskwall with 2 clan escorts and a striking black mare with a cracked left rear shoe. He had fixed the shoe while she watched, and she had not said much, and he had not said much, and that had been the full extent of their acquaintance. But he had heard her horses this morning, had heard the stable boy run past, had seen Myra Holt's face when she'd rushed into the chapel. And then he just stood there in the yard, hammer in hand, and thought about it. Thought about what it looked like from inside. Thought about what it would feel like. He walked down the side aisle. His boots were loud on the stone flags. People turned. He did not look at them. He walked the length of the chapel with soot on his jaw and tools at his hip, and he stopped at the edge of the altar and he looked up at Karga Darkwolf. She looked back at him. Her dark eyes were very steady. There was a muscle working along her jaw. Seth reached into the chest pocket of his linen shirt, this was awkward, where he kept a small folding knife and a short length of copper wire he used for temporary repairs. He had nothing formal on him, nothing appropriate. He had literally nothing to offer except himself, standing here, which was objectively a small and ordinary thing. He held his hand out to her, palm up, the way you'd offer your hand to a horse you wanted to approach you calm. "You shouldn't have to stand here alone," he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried in the stone chapel. "I know I'm nobody. I'm the farrier from the yard, but you shouldn't stand here alone." Karga looked at his open hand for a long moment. The chapel was so silent you could hear the candles breathing. Then she put her hand in his. It took Seth by surprise how warm her hand was, how steady. Her green fingers wrapped around his and her grip was firm without being hard, like she was measuring something. He looked up at her face and found that her expression had shifted just slightly, just at the corners of her mouth and eyes, from stone to something that was not quite softness but was adjacent to it, like land after rain, like something that had been very dry beginning to come alive. "You have soot on your face," she said. "I know," he said. "I did not know a farrier could be so bold," she said. "Neither did I, honestly," he said. And against all probability, in the packed and embarrassed little chapel of Duskwall, Karga Darkwolf almost smiled. The steward mercifully took the arrival of Seth Turner at the altar as his cue to close the whole ceremony down, stepping forward to murmur that it seemed the proceedings were postponed. People filed out in that way of crowd that's been given permission to pretend nothing happened. A few cast looks at Seth and Karga that ranged from baffled to hostile to curious. Most just went. Myra Holt tried to catch Karga at the door. "Karga, I am so sorry. I had no idea Harden would. Where is he?" Karga said. Myra swallowed. "He left for Thorngate on last night's wagon. He said the terms had changed. He heard the clan elder had died and he figured the trade routes weren't. He figured there was nothing left to gain from it," Karga said flatly. Myra's face crumpled with genuine guilt. "I'm sorry." Karga studied her for a moment. "You are not the one who left," she said, and walked out into the gray morning. Seth followed, mostly because he was not sure what else to do and partly because he was not finished yet, though he could not have said finished with what. Outside, the town square of Duskwall was going about its morning drovers pushing cattle to the market pens, a smith's hammer ringing 2 streets over, a woman arguing with her goat. Karga stood on the chapel steps with her fur cape lifting slightly in the wind, and for a moment she looked simply exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with her body. "I need to know something," she said, not looking at him. "All right," he said. "Why did you do that?" He thought about it. He could have said something polished. He didn't have anything polished. "I saw what was happening and I couldn't just keep shoeing horses," he said. She turned and looked at him then, really looked. He got the feeling that being fully looked at by Karga Darkwolf was something like being assessed by something ancient and very clear-sighted. "Colt Harden has your trade routes now," she said. "My elder is dead. The alliance is gone. I have nothing to offer you for what you just did." "I wasn't looking for an offer," Seth said. "All men look for an offer," she said, not with bitterness, just stating what she had learned. "Then I'm a bad example," he said. She studied him another long moment. Then she looked away, toward the mountains that were just barely visible north of town, gray teeth on a gray sky. "I came 3 days early," she said quietly. "I thought arriving early would show good faith. That it would start things well." She paused. "I introduced myself to the town. I walked the market. I tried to be acceptable." She said the last word like it tasted bad. Seth thought about what that had cost her. 3 days of trying, of being watched, of navigating the particular minefield of a human border town as a lone orc woman. "You're more than acceptable," he said. "You do not need to say that." "I know," he said. "I said it anyway." The wind picked up and she put a hand up to catch her braid before it swung across her face. The gesture was so ordinary, so human, just a person catching their own hair in the wind, and it hit him in a place he wasn't quite expecting. "My horses are still at the inn stable," she said finally. "I'll leave today. I need to return to the clan and tell them." She paused, and something moved across her face. "Tell them we have no roots now, that I failed." "You didn't fail," Seth said. He ran. She looked at him. "In my clan, the result is the same." He nodded. He didn't push. He understood the feeling of being blamed for someone else's cowardice. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "You may. Your black mare, I reshod her 3 days ago. That rear shoe, the hoof wall, was thinner than I liked. I packed it, but she needs at least another week before she's ready for mountain roads." He paused. "If you leave today, you're going to go hard on that hoof and she'll be lame inside 20 miles. Karga stared at him. Then she closed her eyes for just a moment. "Of course," she said quietly. "There's no insult meant," he said quickly. "It's just the hoof. It's nothing to do with—" "I know," she said. "I know the mare is Ashfoot. She's 12 years old and I've had her since she was 3. I know what you're saying." She opened her eyes. "A week, you said. At least. Maybe 10 days to be safe. I can check her again in 5 and give you a clearer read." Karga looked at him for a long time. He got the sense she was making some kind of calculation, though what kind he couldn't tell. "There is an inn at the east end of town," she said. "The one with the blue door." "The Iron Bell," he said. "Yes. I paid for 2 weeks when I arrived," she said. "Because I thought—" She stopped. "Because I was being careful. I have the room." "Then stay," he said. "Let Ashfoot heal." She was quiet. "Then, the clan elder's death. It was not peaceful. He was killed, we think, by someone who wanted something that belonged to him." She said this carefully, like a person who has just decided to tell a stranger a thing they perhaps should not. "Something was taken from his body, a relic, something very old and important to our people." Seth waited. "I came to Duskwall partly for the alliance," she said, "but also because I had been told the relic might have been brought here, to this town." She met his eyes. "Someone has it, and I need to find it." He looked at her steadily. "That changes things," he said. "Yes," she said. "Does it change the fact that you need a week to 10 days for the mare's hoof?" She blinked. Then slowly, something that was more clearly a smile this time. "No," she said, "it does not change that." "Then I'm going to go finish the cavalry remounts," Seth said. "And if you want to tell me more about this relic, I'll be in the yard until sundown. I'm easy to find, just follow the hammering." He walked back toward the hitching yard. He did not look back. He had the very distinct feeling that if he looked back, he would lose some ground he had just gained, though he could not have explained why. He was almost to the yard gate when he heard her voice behind him. "Seth Turner," she said. He turned. She was standing exactly where he'd left her, on the chapel steps in her burgundy leather and wolf fur, the wind still moving her braid. She looked like something carved for the front of a ship. "Thank you," she said, "for the hand." He nodded once. "You're welcome," he said, and went back to work. The Iron Bell Inn had a small yard behind it that was separate from the main inn stable, and Karga had negotiated the use of it for Ashfoot and her 2 escorts' horses on arrival. The escorts themselves, a pair of young clan warriors named Breck and Asa, had left the day before, sent back by Karga to notify the clan that the ceremony was imminent. So Karga was now alone in Duskwall with 3 horses, a packed saddlebag, and a mystery she had been carrying like a stone in her chest for 2 weeks. The relic was called the Greywarden Tusk. It was a boar's tusk, carved over centuries with clan lineage glyphs, not magic in any dramatic way, but important the way a nation's founding document is important. It proved the Darkwolf clan's right to the northern mountain roads. Without it, under clan law, the road rights reverted to contest, and any rival clan could challenge for them. With the elder dead and the tusk gone, the Darkwolf clan's position was becoming dangerous in ways that went far beyond Karga's failed alliance. She had traced it through a fur trader who had been at the war camp the night the elder died. The trader, a human named Fenn, had been seen with something small and carved. He had ridden south. He had been riding toward Duskwall. She told Seth all of this that evening, sitting on the fence rail of Ashfoot's small yard while he checked the mare's hoof by lantern light. He listened without interrupting, which she noted. Men usually interrupted her. "This Fenn," he said, setting Ashfoot's hoof down carefully and straightening. "Fur trader, passes through Duskwall. I believe he may have already sold it on," she said. "Sold it to whom?" "That is what I do not know." She watched him wipe his hands on a cloth. He had good hands, scarred and capable, with a gentleness in the way he used them around the horse that she found she kept noticing. "I was hoping the alliance with Hardin would give me access to his caravan network. His drivers go everywhere along this border. Someone in that network would know where Fenn sold what he carried." Seth was quiet for a moment. "I know the Hardin caravan's head drover," he said. "Man named Wick. He comes through every 3 weeks to have the draft horses reshod. He's not loyal to Hardin particularly. He's loyal to whoever pays him and treats him fair, which Hardin doesn't especially." Karga looked at him with careful attention. "You think he would talk to you?" "I think if I ask Wick whether a fur trader named Fenn came through with any interesting cargo in the last month, he'll answer me honest," Seth said. "He'd answer you too, probably, but a lone orc woman asking questions about stolen clan property is a different conversation than a farrier asking after interesting cargo," Karga finished. "Yeah," Seth said, not apologetically, just factually. She respected that. She was sick of people being apologetic about the way the world worked. She preferred people who acknowledged it and then did something about it. "When does Wick next come through?" she asked. 4 days, Seth said. 4 days. Ashfoot needed at least 5 days of rest before Seth would check her again. The timing was not elegant, but it was something. Karga looked at the mare, who was nosing at the water bucket with the content indifference of a creature who knew she was loved. "All right," Karga said. 4 days, Seth nodded. "Then, where are you eating tonight?" The question was so ordinary that it took her half a beat to catch up to it. "The Iron Bell has a common room," she said. "It does," he said. "It also has a cook who was not expecting the wedding to be cancelled and therefore has, I'm told, a large quantity of wedding dinner that needs eating. The innkeeper, Bess, mentioned it to me this morning." He paused. "She's a decent woman. She won't make you uncomfortable." Karga studied him. "You already spoke to her about me." "I asked if you'd been treated well since arriving," he said. "She said she'd taken good care of you, and she was genuinely embarrassed about what happened today." Karga felt that tightening in her chest again, but it was a different flavor this time, softer, less like a wound and more like being reached for. "You are a very strange farrier," she said. "That's the kindest thing anyone said about me in a while," he said. She climbed down from the fence rail and smoothed her skirt. "Let us go eat this unfortunate wedding dinner," she said. He fell into step beside her across the yard, and she noticed, because she noticed everything, that he matched her stride. Most humans either scurried ahead of her or dropped behind, thrown off by her height or her pace. He just walked beside her like it was the most natural thing. It was a small thing. She kept noticing his small things. Bess at the iron bell was indeed a decent woman, stout and brown-haired and brisk, who seated them at the table nearest the fire without ceremony and brought out a meal that had clearly been intended for a celebration dinner: roasted boar with root vegetables, fresh bread, a good hard cheese, and a jug of dark ale. She set it all down with the manner of someone determined to turn a sad occasion into at least a passable evening, and she succeeded. They ate. They talked. Not about the relic at first. Seth asked about the Darkwolf clan, and Karga told him the mountain war camps, the hunting ground politics, the particular pride and stubbornness of a people who had held territory for 300 years against every effort to push them out. He asked good questions. Specific ones, not the kind strangers usually asked, which tended toward the insulting or the romantic mythological. He asked about the horse breeding, about the trade routes, about what the mountain passes were like in deep winter. He had the kind of curiosity that was interested in the actual world. She asked about him. It took her until the bread and cheese to get past his deflections. He had a habit of turning questions back toward her that she recognized as the habit of someone who was not used to being found interesting. He'd grown up in a river town further east. His father had been a blacksmith, not a farrier. There was a difference, he explained, in the way of someone who has given this explanation many times and is mildly tired of having to. Smithing was working iron from scratch. Farriery was working iron on a horse, which was its own entire craft. His father had taught him both. When his father died, Seth had drifted west, picking up cavalry contracts along the frontier because cavalry always needed farriers and cavalry paid well enough to keep a man in meals and a roof. "Do you have people somewhere?" she asked. He looked up from his ale. "A sister back east, we write." He paused. "You." "My clan," she said. "That is my people." "And who's in your clan that you're close to?" She thought about it. "My elder Urag was the closest thing I had to." She stopped. "He is dead now, since 3 weeks ago." "I'm sorry," Seth said. And he said it simply, not with the reflexive polish people sometimes used, but like he actually meant it. "He was the one who believed the alliance was a good idea," she said. "He was the one who argued for it when half the clan thought it was capitulation. He thought it was—" She stopped again, looking at the fire. "He thought it was me having a life, not just a function." Seth was quiet. Then very quietly, "He was right about that, the life part." She looked at him. His face in the firelight was ordinary and specific, the soot smear on his jaw that he'd missed when he washed up, the way one eyebrow was slightly more mobile than the other, the quality of his attention when he looked at her, which was steady and whole and entirely without calculation. "How old are you?" She asked because she was thinking it. 29, he said. "You?" 27, she said. He nodded. Something settled between them, easy and plain, the way territory gets established without anyone having to say anything. They stayed at the table until the fire was low. Bess came by twice to refill the ale jug, and each time gave Karga a small, warm look that was not pity but something adjacent to solidarity. Outside, Duskwall's night sounds took over: the distant lowing of cattle, the creak of the inn sign in the wind, a dog barking somewhere and then stopping. When Karga finally rose to go upstairs, Seth walked her to the foot of the stairs, which was 5 steps from the table and was therefore unnecessary, and they both knew it was unnecessary and neither of them mentioned it. "Same time tomorrow," he said, "to check Ashfoot." "Yes," she said. She was 2 steps up when she turned back. "Seth," he looked up. "Thank you," she said, "again for the dinner." "You're welcome," he said, "again." She went upstairs. He stood at the foot of the stairs for 1 moment longer than he needed to, and then he went out into the night. The next 3 days moved in a rhythm. Seth came to check Ashfoot in the early evening. He and Karga talked in the horse yard, or walked the market, or sat in the Iron Bell common room. They were not romantic occasions. They were something better in some ways. They were two people becoming genuinely known to each other. Karga went to the market on the second day and made herself visible, not because she was comfortable, which she was not, but because she was going to find the relic and she could not find it from her room. She moved through the market stalls with the composed deliberateness of someone who knew they were being watched and had decided to be watched well. She heard the comments. She heard the whispers. She kept her face level. She also found a fur dealer at the north end of the market who had heard of Finn, not a friend, not a partner, but the kind of distant acquaintance that traders accumulate, the one who knows the name and the route. He confirmed what she'd suspected. Finn had passed through Duskwall about 2 weeks before. He'd sold something to a local, not furs, something small. He'd seemed pleased with the transaction, as though he'd gotten more than he'd expected. She told Seth that evening. He listened with his back against the fence post and his eyes on Ashfoot's hoof. Small carved thing, he said. Sold privately above what he'd expected to get. He looked up. There are 3 men in Duskwall who buy that kind of thing. Antiquities, relics, things with provenance. You know them. Their horses come to me, he said. Everyone's horses come to me. She understood then. Being a farrier in a border town was like being a barber in a city. You heard everything, you moved through every social layer, you were invisible in the way that useful people are invisible. Who are they? She asked. He told her the 3 names. One she could dismiss immediately, a collector of Aldrich coins, no interest in anything orc. The second was a merchant who dealt primarily in jewelry and wouldn't know a clan relic from a doorstop. The third was a man named Garrett Moss. Seth's voice changed slightly when he said the name. Not much, but she heard it. Moss, she said. He's a trader, calls himself a procurer. He's connected to a lot of things in this town and along this road. Seth paused. He's not gentle about what he wants. Tell me the rest, she said. He looked at her. He's been pushing to buy the land east of town, land that borders the old Darkwolf hunting grounds. He's been pushing for 2 years and not getting anywhere because the deeds aren't clear. But if the Darkwolf clan lost their mountain road rights, the legal challenge to the land would become viable, Karga said, very quietly. Yeah, Seth said. She was still for a moment. The pieces settled into place with the cold precision of falling stones. Moss killed my elder, she said. I don't know that, Seth said carefully. I do, she said. Or he paid someone to, he sent Fenn. Fenn took the tusk. Fenn sold it here to Moss, who is sitting on it until the clan loses the road rights and the land challenge becomes. She stopped herself. She was getting ahead of provable facts. She breathed. If Moss has it, Seth said, getting it back is not a small thing. No, she said. He has connections to the frontier constables here. He's not someone you can simply walk up to and demand my people's property, she said. I know. She looked at Ashfoot. Urag used to say that orcs have 2 speeds, charge and retreat. He spent a lot of time teaching me there was a third. She paused. Patience. He sounds like he was a good man, Seth said. He was, she said, and her voice was very steady and very controlled, and Seth recognized the control as the thing she used when things were not controlled inside, and he chose not to probe it, which she noticed. I have an idea, he said. But you're not going to like all of it. Tell me. Wick comes through tomorrow, he said. He'll confirm Finn's cargo. That's step 1. We need something on Moss before we can move, because the constables here won't lift a finger against him without evidence. Wick might have more than I think. He paused. There's also a woman, a notary name of Aldrin. She records private sales in this territory. By law, anything sold above 30 silver has to be registered. If Moss bought the tusk from Fenn, there's a record. Karga stared at him. You know this town very well. I've been here 3 years, he said. I keep my head down, I listen. You are, as I said, a very strange farrier, she told him. He almost smiled. It was the almost that she kept finding interesting. He got to the edge of things and then pulled back, like a man who had learned to keep himself somewhat contained. Seth, she said. Yeah. Why are you helping me? You don't have to. This is not your problem. I'm not. She stopped. I'm not anyone who can offer you anything. The alliance is gone. The roots are gone. I'm just a woman alone in a town that doesn't want her." He was quiet for long enough that she thought he wasn't going to answer. Then he said, "3 days ago I was shoeing a cavalry horse and you were standing at an altar alone, and I thought nobody should feel like that. Nobody should feel like they don't matter." He looked at her. "You matter. The relic matters. Your clan matters and I can help." He paused. That's all. It was not all, they both knew it. But she let him have the simplicity of it for now, because she was still learning the shape of him, and she thought there was more worth finding. "All right," she said. "Tomorrow, Wick." Wick arrived at midday, driving 3 of Hardin's big draft horses with their feet in appalling condition, which meant Seth had an hour's legitimate work to keep him occupied while they talked. Karga stayed out of sight at his suggestion. She stood in the narrow alley beside the hitching yard and listened. Wick confirmed it without much prompting. Fenn had come through with the Hardin caravan 2 weeks prior, hitching a ride for coin. He'd carried a leather satchel he was very protective of. He'd gotten off at Duskwall and gone directly to the East Quarter, which was where Garrett Moss kept his operation. Wick said this with the tone of a man who had learned to be incurious about Moss's business and had prospered by staying that way. He also said something else. He said Fenn was still in town, that he hadn't left, that he was being kept, Wick thought, in one of Moss's outbuildings, the one at the edge of his property where Moss put people he was not done with yet. "Kept," Seth repeated. Wick lowered his voice. Fenn had apparently decided after selling the tusk to Moss that he wanted a bigger share of whatever Moss was planning. He had made demands. Moss had responded by putting him in the outbuilding, and the word along the drover's circuit was that Fenn had been there a week and would remain there, until Moss decided he was no longer useful or no longer dangerous. Given what Moss apparently knew Fenn had done, which was murder an orc elder, and Moss had paid for that, which made Moss party to it, Fenn being no longer useful and Fenn simply disappearing were probably the same event, just separated by time. When Wick left with his freshly shod draft horses, Karga came out of the alley. They stood in the yard and looked at each other. "Fenn is a witness," she said. "Yes," Seth said. "If he is freed and brought before the frontier constables, he becomes evidence," Seth said. "He can implicate Moss, the murder, the theft, the unlawful detention, all of it." "Will the constables act on the testimony of a man who helped murder an orc?" she asked. Her voice was flat. Seth considered. "Constable Vane is a fair woman," he said. "She came here from Aldrich Province 4 years ago. She's not Moss's. She's the only one I'd trust with this." Karga nodded slowly. "We need to get Fenn out of Moss's outbuilding," she said. "Yes," Seth said, "and Moss is going to notice." "Then we do it openly," she said, and something shifted in her face, something that was not quite the war camp expression but was kin to it. Planning, certainty, the look of a person who has decided the time for patience is done. "That's the part I said you wouldn't like," Seth said. "I think I like it fine," she said. They planned it for 1 day. 1 day of preparation. Seth went to Constable Vane and laid out the full story, the chain of evidence, the murder, the tusk, Fenn's location. Vane listened with her arms folded and her face unreadable, and when Seth finished, she was quiet for a long time. "I can't move on Moss's property without cause," she said. "If a witness is being unlawfully detained," Seth said, "that's cause. If I can prove he's there," she said. "He's there," Seth said. "I'll go get him." Vane stared at him. "That's either very brave or very stupid." "It's probably both," Seth admitted. "If I'm not on site within 5 minutes of any disturbance," Vane said, "the whole thing falls apart." "Then be on site within 5 minutes," Seth said. Vane looked at him a long time. "Is this for the orc woman?" "It's for justice," Seth said. "And yes, both can be true." Vane drummed her fingers on her desk. Then, "All right." The next morning was clear and cold, with a wind coming off the mountains that smelled of pine and distance. Seth walked to Moss's property on the east edge of town at 9 o'clock with his hands in his pockets and his tools at his belt, looking like a man on an ordinary errand. Karga walked beside him, which was not part of any plan either of them had made explicit. It had just happened, when she'd fallen into step with him on the road and he hadn't said anything about it, and she hadn't asked. Moss's operation occupied a half-acre behind a split-rail fence, a main house, a large storage building, and a smaller outbuilding in the back corner, low and windowless. 3 of Moss's men were visible in the yard, 1 at the gate, 2 near the storage building. The man at the gate was a heavy-set enforcer with a long knife at his belt. He put his hand up when he saw them coming. "Farrier," he said, looking past Seth at Karga with the particular expression of a man deciding how much of a problem she was going to be. "You got no business here." "Constable Vane sent me," Seth said. "She needs to speak with a man named Fenn. She has reason to believe he's on this property." The enforcer's jaw tightened. "Ain't no Fenn here." "I said constable sent me," Seth said. "You can let me through to check, or she can come herself and search. Your call." A crowd was beginning to gather at the road behind them. It happened fast in small towns. Someone saw a confrontation and stopped, and then other people stopped because someone was stopping, and within 2 minutes there were 15 people watching from the road. Seth felt the weight of the audience. He did not look back. The enforcer looked at Karga. "She doesn't go in." "We go in together or I go get Vane," Seth said. The enforcer moved to take Seth's arm, which was the mistake. Because Karga was already moving, not violently, not striking anyone, but moving with the kind of controlled, purposeful speed that made the enforcer step back purely on instinct. She went past him through the gate like a strong current around a rock, and the 2 men near the storage building both stepped aside without entirely meaning to. She had the outbuilding's bar up, and the door opened before either of them had recovered their footing. Inside, on a pile of dirty straw, sat a wiry human man of about 45 with a split lip and bruised eyes who looked up into the sudden morning light with the blink of someone who had been in darkness long enough to forget what light felt like. "Fenn," Seth said from behind Karga. The man looked at Seth, looked at Karga, went very still. By this point, Moss himself had emerged from the main house, a broad, florid man in a town merchant's coat with silver buttons, moving fast across his yard with the specific fury of someone whose power is being publicly questioned. "What in the name of who authorized?" He stopped when he saw Karga. His face did something complicated. "Garrett Moss," said Constable Vane from behind the crowd at the gate, walking through it with her badge visible and 2 deputies at her sides. She had arrived within 4 minutes. "I'm going to need you to step back from that door." The crowd at the road had grown to 40 people. Moss saw them, saw the constable, saw Karga Darkwolf standing in the doorway of his outbuilding with Fenn visible behind her, and the particular expression on her face of someone who has been patient for as long as patience serves. "You have no right," Moss said, voice dropping to something dangerous. "I have every right," Vane said. "Step back." He didn't step back. One of his enforcers started forward, and there was a long, teetering moment in the cold morning air where everything could have gone wrong. Seth stepped forward. Not far, 1 step, putting himself at Karga's shoulder, at the door of the outbuilding, in clear view of every person watching from the road. He was still just a farrier with a leather apron and a rasp at his belt. He was not impressive to look at, but he was there, and he was unmistakably there on purpose, and the plainness of it, this ordinary man standing his ground, seemed to land differently than anything theatrical might have. Moss stopped. Vane moved past him to the outbuilding door. Fenn, in the end, did not need much encouragement. A week in a dark shed with a split lip tends to simplify a man's calculations considerably. He talked to Vane for 40 minutes in her office while Moss was held in the street under the eyes of her deputies. He confirmed the murder. He confirmed the tusk. He told her where Moss had put it, a lockbox in the storage building, and gave her the location of the key. Vane had the tusk in her hands by 11 o'clock. She brought it to the constable's office, where Karga was waiting, and set it on the desk between them. Karga looked at it for a moment. Then she picked it up with both hands, carefully, the way you handle something irreplaceable. It was a boar's tusk about the length of her forearm, yellowed with age and carved from root to tip with lineage marks that Karga's people had been adding to for generations. The last marks, near the narrow end, were her elder's hand. Something in her face shifted. Seth, standing near the wall, watched her hold it and said nothing. There was nothing to say. He just watched her face as she held the tusk and let some of what she had been carrying release. Moss was arrested. Fenn was arrested, charged separately for his part in the elder's murder. Vane made it clear that his testimony earned him nothing beyond the reduction of a charge that would otherwise have seen him hanged. The evidence was enough. The chain was tight, and Vane was the kind of constable who made things stick. Moss's enforcers scattered. His property was put under seal. It was over by noon. They walked back through the market together, Karga with the tusk wrapped and strapped to her back, Seth beside her, his apron dusty and his face tired and very quiet. The market people watched them. The watching was different from 3 days ago. Less hostile, more complicated. A woman at the bread stall nodded to Karga as they passed, a small but deliberate thing. At the edge of the market near the square, Karga stopped. Seth stopped beside her. She was looking at the chapel. The doors were closed. The morning's light was playing on the stone steps. "I keep thinking," she said, "about what you said, that nobody should feel like that." He waited. "I have spent a very long time," she said, "not feeling like I was allowed to feel anything about how I was treated. Because to feel it was to admit it was happening, and to admit it was happening meant admitting that I had no defense against it." She paused. "Do you understand that?" "Yes," he said simply. She looked at him. 3 days ago you walked into that chapel with soot on your face and tools at your belt, and you held your hand out to me like it was the most normal thing in the world." "It felt like the only thing that made sense at the time," he said. "It was extraordinary," she said quietly, "and I don't think you know that." "I'm just a farrier," he said. "You keep saying that," she said. As though it's a reason not to matter, she turned to face him fully. "My clan has a custom. When someone acts with," she paused, searching, "with what we call bloodhunter, courage that costs you something, we acknowledge it, publicly and personally." She looked at him steadily. "You acted with bloodhunter for me twice in 3 days. In my clan, that is not a small thing." He looked back at her and she watched him try to minimize it, try to wave it away and then stop himself. She watched him actually accept it. She found that tremendously moving. "What does the acknowledgement look like?" he asked carefully. She reached up. She had to reach up only slightly, their heights not as different as some, and laid her palm against his jaw, just that. Her thumb near the corner of his mouth, her fingers along his jaw, her palm against the warm scrape of his stubble. She felt him go very still. "It looks like this," she said. "And it means I see you. What you did was real. You are not invisible to me." He lifted his hand and covered hers where it lay against his jaw. His hand was bigger than hers, which surprised her. She had not expected that. He held her hand there for a moment. "I haven't been very visible to anyone in a long time," he said quietly. "I know," she said. "I can tell." She searched his face. "Does it bother you being seen?" "By you?" he said. "No." She kept her hand there a moment longer. Then she let it drop, and they were standing in the market square in the midday sun looking at each other, and neither of them said anything about what had just happened. But something had changed shape. The thing that had been practical had become personal, and they both knew it. "I need to send word to my clan," she said finally. "The tusk is recovered. Urag's murder has a name." She paused. "I can leave in 3 days when Vane has the formal documentation complete." 3 days, Seth thought. 3 days less whatever time Ashfoot still needed. Had checked Ashfoot that morning before all of this, and the hoof was healing well, better than he'd expected. "The hoof is almost healed," he said. "You said 5 days before you check," she said. "It's been 5 days." She looked at him. "You checked this morning." "Yes, and another 2 or 3 days to be fully safe," he said. "But I think she could manage a careful ride in 3. Karga was quiet. The wind moved between them, and somewhere on the far side of the square a horse neighed and someone laughed. 2 days, she said. "I'll leave in 2 days if Ashfoot is ready." "All right," he said. He thought 2 days. He thought, "I have spent 3 years in this town telling myself I was fine being alone, and I have believed it. And now I am standing in this square counting the days I have left." He did not say any of this. He walked her back to the iron bell, and they ate at the corner table again because it had become their table, and they stayed until the fire was very low, and then he walked her to the foot of the stairs, which was still 5 steps from the table and still unnecessary. He stopped. She stopped. "Karga," he said. She turned 2 steps up and looked at him. He had been thinking about what to say for approximately the last 2 hours and had not arrived at anything that sounded right. So he said what was true. "I'm going to miss you," he said. "That's all, I just wanted to say it." She looked at him for a long, still moment. Then she came back down the 2 steps, and before he fully understood what was happening, she took hold of his shirt at the chest, not violently, firmly, and she kissed him. Not a question, not an asking. She kissed him the way she did everything, with full commitment and no hedging. And for a split second he was so surprised that he didn't move. And then he moved, one hand coming up to the back of her neck and one to her waist, and he kissed her back with everything he had, which turned out to be quite a lot more than he'd realized. When they finally separated, they were both breathing a little unevenly. She still had her hand in his shirt, he still had his hand at her waist. "I'm going to miss you too," she said, "and I'm not willing to." He stared at her. "What does that mean?" "It means," she said, "that I would like you to come with me." The silence stretched. "To your clan," he said. "Yes." "I'm a farrier from a river town," he said. "I'm human. Your clan, my clan needs a farrier," she said. "We breed excellent horses and we shoe them indifferently. Ureg always said this was our great flaw." She paused. "And my clan needs its tusk back, and the person who helped get it back is standing in front of me." "You're asking me because of the horses," he said. "I'm asking you because of the horses," she agreed, "and because you held your hand out to me when I was alone at an altar, and it made me feel like a person again, and I have not felt that cleanly for a very long time." She released his shirt, smoothing the fabric absently. "But the horses also genuinely need work." He laughed. Actually laughed, sudden and real, and she watched his face transform with it, the lines of it rearranging into something warm and young and completely unguarded. She decided she would see to it that he looked like that more often. "I don't know anything about orc clans," he said. "I will teach you," she said. "My orcish is about 15 words," he said. "I will teach you more," she said. "Karga," he said, then quieter. "Are you sure?" She looked at him. "Seth Turner," she said, and she said his name the way she said important things, clearly and completely. "I have been very careful my entire life about the things I say yes to, and I do not think I have ever said yes to the right thing. I am saying yes to the right thing." He was quiet for a long moment. She could see him doing the math. 3 years in Duskwall, a cavalry contract that could be renegotiated or abandoned, a room at a boarding house with 6 months left on it. Not much to weigh against something like this. Not much to lose. "I'll need to put in for a close on my cavalry contract," he said. "Takes about a week for the paperwork." "A week," she said. "Ashfoot needs another 2 or 3 days," he said. "A week then," she said. "We leave in a week." "We leave in a week," he said. She raised herself slightly and pressed her forehead to his an orc greeting, an orc farewell, an orc everything in between, and held it there for a breath. "Good night, Seth," she said. "Good night, Karga," he said. She went upstairs. He stood at the foot of the stairs, and this time he smiled the whole way to the door. The week passed with momentum. Seth put in his clothes with the cavalry command at Duskwall's East Barracks, which went smoothly because he had built a good reputation, and they released him without grievance, with the offer to re-engage if he came back through. He sorted his things at the boarding house. He had less than he might have expected, the accumulation of 3 deliberate years of not settling, and it all fit into 2 saddlebags and a tool chest. Karga spent the week doing what she was extraordinarily good at, which was managing the aftermath of a situation with precision. She worked with Constable Vane on the documentation of the Tusk's recovery. She wrote to her clan long, careful letters that she carried to the courier post herself, explaining everything. Urag's murder, Moss's arrest, the Tusk's return, and something else. A farrier named Seth Turner, a human of Bloodhunter, who had helped accomplish all of this and who would be coming to the mountain war camp at Karga's invitation. She did not know how that letter would land. She had some thoughts about it, and they were not all optimistic. She and Seth ate together every evening that week at the Iron Bell. Bess had quietly adopted them as a fixture and kept their table free without being asked. The conversations were. She could not have said exactly how the conversations were. They moved from practical things to the particular things that were hard to say and got said anyway. He told her about his father, who had been a careful man and a sad one, a man who worked very hard and expected very little, and how Seth had spent years trying to figure out if that was wisdom or defeat. She told him about the first time she had come to a human town alone, at 19, and what that had been like, and he listened with the particular quality of listening that was not waiting to respond but actually receiving. She told him about a man she had been with once 3 years ago, a human trader who had been kind in private and dismissive in public, and how she had stayed with it too long because kindness in private had seemed like a lot when public was as difficult as it was. Seth was quiet when she told him that. Then he said, "I would never do that to you." "I know," she said, and she did know. She knew it the way she knew the weather coming off the mountains, something read in the quality of the air, certain before the clouds arrived. She knew Seth Turner. She also liked him in a way that kept catching her off guard. He was funny, quietly, not performatively, but with a dry specificity that landed without announcing itself. He noticed things. He said precisely what he meant, and then stopped talking, which she found extremely restful. He was patient with Ashfoot and attentive to the other horses in the Iron Bell stable when he was there, the way a person is attentive to things they genuinely care about rather than things they're performing care for. And he looked at her like she was the most interesting thing in the room, which she had decided was her favorite thing about him. The night before they were to leave, they walked the edge of town to the north past the last fence line, onto the road that wound up toward the hills, with Duskwall's lights behind them and the mountains ahead as a black suggestion against a sky full of stars. The air was cold and smelled like distance. Karga had her cape around her shoulders and her breath was visible. "You nervous?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "You?" "I'm the one bringing an uninvited human to a war camp," she said. "I am very nervous." "Will they accept me?" he said. She thought about the honest answer. "I don't know," she said. "Not immediately. Some of my clan have fought humans. Some have lost people to humans. There will be those who see a human beside me and make up their minds before you've said a word." He nodded. "And what do I do about that?" "You do what you do," she said. "You work, you learn, you don't flinch when people are rude, and you don't push when people are cold. You let it take the time it takes." She paused. "Can you do that?" "I've been the new person in a strange place before," he said. "I know how to be patient." "Yes," she said. "I know you do." They were walking close enough that their arms brushed occasionally. She was aware of it each time with a clarity that was slightly inconvenient. "Karga," he said. "Yes. I want to say something and I'm going to say it badly." "Say it anyway," she said. He stopped walking. She stopped beside him and turned to look at him. The starlight made his face shadowed and specific. "I know that this started as I walked into a chapel to stop someone from standing alone," he said. "And then it became about the relic and the alliance and Ashfoot's hoof, and there were a lot of practical things stacked up that made spending time together make sense. I know that." "Yes," she said. "And I want you to know that none of that is why I'm going with you," he said. "The relic is returned. The alliance is done. Ashfoot's hoof is healed. There's nothing practical anymore. I'm going because I want to be where you are." He paused. "I wanted to say that directly so you knew." She looked at him for a long moment in the starlight. "Seth," she said. "Yeah. I kissed you at the foot of a staircase 3 days ago," she said. "And I asked you to come with me to my clan's mountain camp. I think it was already established that I want you where I am." "I know," he said, "but I wanted you to know it was mutual, clearly." "You wanted me to know," she repeated. "Yes," he said. "That I'm wanted," she said, and her voice had gone softer than she usually let it. "Yes," he said. She reached up and took his face in both hands. His hands came to her waist. She pressed her forehead to his first, the greeting, the seal of something. And then she kissed him in the dark at the edge of town, with the mountains ahead and the lights behind. And she put into the kiss the things she had been carrying for a week and a half. The gratitude and the longing and the wanting and the enormous complicated relief of being found by someone who looked and actually saw. He pulled her closer. She felt his arms tighten and she let herself be pulled, which was not something she did often, and it felt like something she had not known she needed until she was in the middle of it. When they separated, she kept her hands at the back of his neck, looking at him. "You are going to be all right at the war camp," she said softly, "because you are the kind of person who is all right in hard places." "You'll be there," he said. "Yes," she said. "I'll be there." She kissed him once more, quick and certain, and then she took his hand and they walked back toward the lights of Duskwall with their fingers interlaced and their breath visible in the cold air, and neither of them saying anything else that night because there was nothing else to say. They left at first light. The road north out of Duskwall turned into a track, and then into a path, and then into suggestion and memory, following the old markers, a cut in a tree, a cairn of stones, a fork taken left rather than right that Karga navigated with the ease of someone reading a language they'd been born to. Seth rode a roan gelding named Cole that he'd owned for 2 years, and Karga rode Ashfoot, and the mare moved clean and sound on her heeled hoof, and the morning was gray and cold and enormous. The mountain country was unlike anything Seth had spent time in. He had worked frontier towns and river valleys, flat things, or gently rolling things. The Greystone Mountains were not gentle. They rose from the foothills like a sudden argument, all gray stone and dark pine, and silences that felt inhabited. Karga moved through it like she'd been poured there, easy and alert at once. They talked as they rode. He asked her about the terrain, and she told him how it changed by season, the spring passes filling with meltwater, the summer high country being clean and cool while the lowlands roasted, the autumn bringing hunters from 3 clans into the same territory with the attendant politics. She told him about the war camp layout, where things were, what to expect. She told him about the people he would meet, including, with some care, the clan's acting leader now that Urag was gone, a woman named Hack Stoneback, older, traditional, who had been willing to consider the Harden alliance because Urag had pushed for it but who had not entirely believed in it. "She will not like me," Seth said. "She will not trust you," Karga said. "That is different. She doesn't like most people. But she is fair and she is observant, and she has watched many people prove themselves or fail to. If you are what I say you are, she will come to her own conclusion." "And what do you say I am?" he asked. She looked at him sideways from Ashfoot's back. "A man of Bloodhunter," she said, "and a good farrier," he smiled. "In that order, depending on the day," she said. The war camp came into sight on the afternoon of the 2nd day of travel. It was bigger than Seth had imagined. Not the dozen hide tents he'd been picturing, but a full settlement of nearly 40 structures, with permanent wooden frames fitted with hide walls and tarp roofs, a central fire that seemed always lit, paddocks for the horse herd, a smithing area that Seth could smell before he could see it, and people. People moving between structures, working, carrying things, talking, doing the 1,000 ordinary things that a living community does, and stopping one by one and then in groups, when they saw the 2 riders coming in from the south path. Karga rode in front. She rode with her back straight and her chin up, and the tusk visible on her back and Ashfoot moving beautifully under her. Seth rode behind by half a length. That was her call, she'd said to him that morning. It was her people and her return, and it needed to be clear who was coming home. The camp watched. Some people came forward, a cluster of younger warriors, curious and cautious. A woman with a child on her hip who was less cautious and more hostile, which Seth absorbed without expression. And then, from the central fire, a large orc woman of perhaps 50 years with scars on her arms and a face like weathered granite, who walked toward them with the bearing of someone who has spent decades being the most significant person in any given space. Hack Stoneback. She stopped in the middle of the camp's open ground, and Karga reined Ashfoot in and slid down from the saddle. She unstrapped the wrapped tusk from her back and held it out, Hack looked at it for a moment. Then she looked at Karga, and something moved across her face that was not quite the same as a human's grief but was in the same country. She took the tusk in both hands. Around the camp, the watching orcs went very still. Then Hack raised the tusk above her head briefly and said something in Orcish that Seth didn't understand but felt in his chest, and the camp gave back a sound that was half cry and half cheer, raw and unanimous and unmistakably relief. Karga stood in the middle of it and closed her eyes for one moment and then opened them and was, once again, entirely composed. Hack lowered the tusk. She looked at Karga. Then she looked at Seth, who had dismounted and was standing by Cole's head holding the bridle. "Human," Hack said, in the common tongue which Seth understood. "Yes," Seth said. "Karga tells me you were at the altar," she said. "Yes," Seth said. "And in the yard of the man who killed Urag," she said. "Yes," Seth said. Hack studied him. She was not subtle about it. She looked at him the way you'd look at a horse you were considering buying, taking in every component. He let her look. "You shoe horses," she said. "I do," he said. She looked at his tool belt. Something shifted at the corner of her mouth. "Our horses need work," she said. "I was told," he said, a long pause. Around them the camp was beginning to move again, the initial stillness giving way to people going back to what they'd been doing, the crisis past, the tusk home. "I'm not going to tell you that you are welcome," Hack said to Seth, "because that would be giving you something you haven't earned, but you are allowed to be here. Those are different things." "I understand the difference," Seth said. Hack grunted. She looked at Karga. "Take him to the far paddock. The gray stallion has been lame for a week and I want to know why." It was not an invitation. It was an assignment. Seth recognized it as a test dressed as a task, and he walked with Karga to the far paddock without any indication that he'd noticed the dressing. The gray stallion had a stone bruise. Seth diagnosed it in 10 minutes and explained what he was doing as he worked, partly because Karga was watching, and partly because 3 young clan members had drifted over to observe, and he thought it was better to narrate than to be mysterious. Mysterious people in strange camps made people nervous. He said what he was doing and why, in simple terms, and by the time he'd packed and wrapped the hoof properly, 2 of the young orcs had inched close enough to see clearly. Over the following days he was given more horses. Then he was brought a broken bridle to assess. Then someone asked him, somewhat grudgingly, if he knew anything about cold forging iron. He did. He showed them. He was careful. He did not try to make friends. He was consistently polite, consistently patient, consistently useful, and when people were cold to him, and some were, pointedly, he didn't push back and he didn't wilt. He just kept working. Karga watched all of this. He knew she was watching, and it didn't make him self-conscious. He had nothing to hide in what he was doing, because what he was doing was simply himself. He had figured out by the end of his first week in the camp that the only path was honesty in everything, honest about what he knew, honest about what he didn't know, honest about why he was there. At night, Karga's structure was on the west edge of the camp, well-made and private, and he had been given a smaller adjacent one that had been a storage space before it was cleared out. The walls between the structures were close enough that they could speak through them, which they did sometimes. Late at night, quiet conversation about the day, about a horse he'd worked on, about something she'd heard at the central fire, the specific warm intimacy of people who share a proximity and are comfortable in it. But it was more than proximity, and they both knew it. On the 9th night, the camp had a communal fire. Someone brought out instruments, drum and a kind of bone pipe, and the evening became a thing. Food passed around, people sitting in clusters, children running and being sent to bed, the fire large and warm and old. Seth sat with Karga at the edge of the circle. She translated the conversations he couldn't follow. At some point during the evening, not at any dramatic moment, she leaned against his shoulder and stayed there, and he put his arm around her and she did not move away, and 3 or 4 people noticed and looked away and said nothing, which in the war camp was approximately a blessing. Hack noticed. She was sitting across the fire and she caught Seth's eye for a moment and then looked back at the fire with no particular expression, which he was beginning to understand was her version of acceptance. "How am I doing?" he said quietly into Karga's hair. "Better than I expected," she said, which was already better than almost anyone has ever done. "That's a very Karga-shaped compliment," he said. "Thank you," she said, completely unironically. He pressed his lips to the top of her head. She tilted her face up and they kissed briefly, warmly, right there at the edge of the fire circle, which was bold and not quite planned and also, he thought, exactly right. 2 weeks into camp life, Hack asked to speak to Seth alone. They sat across from each other in Hack's structure, which was the largest in the camp, with the tusk hanging in its place of honor on the wall behind her. Hack had a cup of bitter tea and Seth had a cup of the same, and she looked at him for a long time. "Karga has not been happy," Hack said. "Not for a long time." Seth said nothing. He waited. "She came home once," Hack said. "From a time in the human lands she was changed. She did not tell me the particulars. I did not push, but she was less open. Afterward," Hack drank her tea. "It takes a lot to close a door in Karga. She is not fragile, but when a door closes in her, it closes completely." "I know," Seth said. "The door is open now," Hack said, "since she came back with you." Seth looked at the tusk on the wall, then back at Hack. "I don't take that lightly," he said. "No," Hack said. "You don't, that is visible." She set her cup down. "I have watched you for 2 weeks. You are patient. You are capable. You treat our horses and our people with the same respectful attention, which is not nothing." She paused. "Some of my clan have reservations about your being here. I do not intend to override those reservations by decree. I intend to let time do the work as it usually does." "I understand," he said. "What do you intend?" she asked. "For Karga." He thought about how to say it. "I intend to stay," he said. "For as long as she'll have me, I'd like to make my life where she is." Hack was quiet for a moment. "She is clan head now," she said. "With Urag gone, the role falls to her. She has not accepted it yet, she is still deciding. But if she does, her life is here, in this camp, in these mountains." "I know," he said. "You would stay permanently." She said it not as a challenge but as a genuine question. "Yes," he said. She looked at him. "Then you should tell her that," she said. "Directly, she does not assume, she needs to hear it." "I'll tell her," he said. "Good," said Hack and refilled his tea. He told her that evening. They were in the horse paddock because that was where they often ended up in the early evening, and he was checking a young mare's feet and Karga was leaning on the fence watching. "I want to stay," he said. Not preamble, just the statement. Karga looked at him. "Permanently," he said. "If you want that." She was quiet for long enough that he held his breath. "Hack spoke to you," she said. "Yes," he said. She said, "Tell me directly," she said. "She did," he said. "Hack does not say that lightly," Karga said. "No," he said. Karga looked at the young mare, who was regarding both of them with equine patience. Then she looked at Seth. He had a hoof pick in one hand and straw in his hair and a smear of something across his chin, and she thought he was the most grounding sight she had ever seen. "I accepted the clan head role this morning," she said. "I did not tell you yet." "Karga," he said, "my life is here now, entirely. I need you to know that clearly before you say you'll stay." "I know that clearly," he said. She climbed over the fence into the paddock and walked to him and stopped in front of him. He looked up at her. She had an inch on him, maybe 2, and she put her hands on either side of his face, the same way she'd done on the chapel steps. Her thumbs near the corners of his mouth, her fingers along his jaw. "I choose you," she said. "In the way of my people, in the way of blood honor and open choice, I choose you, not as a function or an alliance or a practical thing. As mine, if you'll be that." He covered her hands with his just like he had on the chapel steps. "I'm yours," he said. She kissed him, and this time there was nothing brief about it. The young mare shuffled away to give them privacy, which was considerate of her. The camp's evening sounds moved around them, the central fire crackling, voices carrying across the open ground the percussion of ordinary life, and neither of them moved for a long time. When they finally separated, it was getting dark, and Karga had her forehead against his, and they were breathing the same small space of air. "I should warn you," she said. "A clan head choosing a partner there will be a ceremony." "What kind of ceremony?" he said. A formal acknowledgement. There is a council. They must witness the choice. She paused. It will be public. A ceremony at an altar, he said. She pulled back and looked at him, and there was laughter in her face, real, rare, radiant. I suppose so, she said. Will you stand alone this time, he said. Not if you're there, she said. I'll be there, he said. She pulled him close by the front of his shirt and held him for a moment, her chin at the top of his head, his arms wrapped around her, and she held him the way she held the things that were hers, securely, completely, like she was not planning to let go. Around the camp, as the dark came in fully and the stars took over the mountain sky, life continued. The fire burned high. The horses settled. And in the paddock, for as long as they wanted, Karga Darkwolf and Seth Turner stayed where they were, easy and warm and finished with all the things that had been keeping them from here. The ceremony was 3 days later, not a chapel this time. The Darkwolf clan held their acknowledgments at the council stone, a natural outcropping of granite at the center of the camp that was old enough to have the clan's earliest marks carved into it. A flat slab on top served as the place of declaration, with the council of 6 elders standing in a semicircle to witness, and the rest of the clan gathered behind. Hack stood at the center. She held the Greywarden tusk as she always held it at ceremonies, not with authority over it but as its keeper, the way you hold something that belongs to everyone. Karga arrived from the west side of the camp. She was in the same burgundy leather and wolf fur she had worn to the chapel, because it was what she had, her formal wear, the thing she wore for things that mattered. But she had added something, a thin cord around her right wrist, braided from 3 strands of horsehair, 1 black, 1 gray, 1 roan. She had braided it herself, the night before, from 3 strands she'd taken from the manes of Ashfoot, the gray stallion, and Cole. She had not explained this to Seth. It was not a thing that needed explanation. She walked to the council stone and stood before Hack, and the clan watched, and it was nothing like the chapel in Duskwall. There was no embarrassed silence. There was no looking away. The clan watched because this mattered to them, and they looked because it was right to look when something real was happening. Seth came from the east side of the camp. He had cleaned up, his best shirt, brushed and untorn, tucked into his canvas trousers, his boots decent. His tulle apron was absent for the first time since she'd met him. He looked, without the apron, simultaneously more ordinary and somehow more visible, like a sentence without punctuation that you read more carefully. He had gotten a haircut from one of the clan's younger members who had offered, which had gone all right. There was no soot on his jaw today. He walked down the aisle between the watching clan members, because the people had arranged themselves on either side naturally, the way people do when they sense the weight of a moment, and he walked all the way to the council stone, and he stopped in front of Karga. He held out his hand, palm up, the way you'd offer your hand to a horse. The way he'd offered it to her 3 weeks ago in a stone chapel in Duskwall. Her dark eyes went to his face, and in them he saw what she let him see, everything. The past 3 weeks and what they had been. The 2 months before, the altar, the hand, the relic, the long evenings and the mountain road and the paddock in the dark. The choosing, all of it gathered into one look. She put her hand in his. The council murmured something in orcish formal words, the right words, the words that acknowledged what was being done here. Hack raised the tusk briefly. The clan gave that sound that was half cry and half cheer, the same sound they'd given when the tusk came home, which Seth understood was not coincidence. He was still holding her hand. She was still looking at him. "You came," she said quietly, just between them. "I said I would," he said. "You did," she said. She raised their joined hands and pressed the back of his hand to the carved surface of the council stone, an orc gesture he did not know but felt the weight of, a sealing of something against something that had lasted centuries. Then she lowered their hands and held his and looked at him with her whole face open and clear. "You are mine," she said. "I am yours," he said. "And I am yours," she said. He lifted their joined hands and kissed the back of her knuckles, which was not an orc gesture but was his simple and certain. And she let him have it, and she smiled at him, really smiled, the full-face thing that he had not seen clearly until this moment, wide and warm and unlocked. The clan feast that night was long and good, and Karga sat beside Seth at the central fire, and Hack sat on Seth's other side and ate her food in stern silence, and occasionally said something to him about the horses that was actually just conversation dressed up as logistics, which he accepted graciously. 3 of the younger warriors taught him a dice game, and he lost badly, and they were extremely pleased about this. Someone gave him a cup of the clan's dark fermented grain drink, and he was honest about the fact that it was genuinely terrible, and that made people laugh. He was not family. He was not a clan member in the full sense, not yet, possibly not for a long time. He was a human man at an orc war camp who shod horses and loved their clan head and was beginning slowly to belong. Karga watched him across the fire at one point when he didn't know she was watching, when he was in the middle of laughing at something one of the young warriors had said, genuine and unguarded, his face lit by firelight, and she thought, this is what Urag meant, when he'd said she deserved a life, not just a function. This uncomplicated, enormous, ordinary thing of having somewhere to be and someone to be beside. She held the horsehair cord on her wrist and thought of the 3 horses, hers, his, the gray stallion she now thought of as theirs, and thought that 3 strands braided together held better than any one of them alone. Seth caught her looking. He raised his cup to her from across the fire, the small, informal toast of a person who knows they're seen. She raised hers back. Around them, the fire burned and the clan talked and the mountains held the night, cold and vast and permanent, and Seth Turner, farrier, a man of ordinary means and extraordinary patience, was not the least bit invisible.